All right, so I was just thinking about how to set up this conversation, which I really look forward to having. So I thought, let me start here. Perhaps because the past is already a built-up landscape with clearly identifiable landmarks and inflection points, and perhaps to use the language that you are more familiar with in the rail sector, turnouts as well. For better or worse, it is almost always inviting, an inviting proposition to dwell in the past and either to wallow in its miseries or to build a nostalgic monument based on past successes and whatever victories we may have scored in the past. And that's how I've always felt about how we conceive and sometimes frame most of our discussions about rail as a technology, the technology that captivates our imagination, one that is undeniably carved, shaped, contoured, as well as indeed scarred our past and our history. So along that vein, one has to resist, almost have to resist the powerful urge to channel the late great Hugh Masekela when he said, "There's a train that comes from Namibia and Malawi. There's a train that comes from Zambia and Zimbabwe. There's a train that comes from Angola," and he would say Mozambique, "from Lesotho, from Botswana, from Swaziland, and from all the hinterlands of Southern and Central Africa." That's inviting to almost always want to frame it that way. The allure of being stuck with a lens of looking at it in the past in relation to rail as a technology. But it has to be resisted, this urge to dwell in the past. And the reason I say that is that no matter where you look in the region, and much of the continent beyond the Southern African region, a new rail landscape is emerging. And perhaps if you could do a take two today, I suspect Brahu would have to think along the lines of not of a train coming from and coming to Johannesburg and its metropoli, but arguably, I'd say, perhaps he would be forced to reconsider and perhaps frame it this way and say, there's a train that runs between Kapirimposhi and Dar es Salaam. There's a train that runs between Muatize and Lilongwe to Nakala Port. There's a train that runs between Chikwalakwala and Rutenga. And importantly, there's a train that will run between Bapong and Walvis Bay, and between Ndola and Lobito. That's the train on which I'm hoping all of us are on board this morning as we have this conversation in framing of this year's conference theme, which is transporting Africa forward, accelerating rail growth to boost mobility and economic opportunity across Africa. And so with that said then, I'd like to welcome my esteemed guests to this panel discussion, Minister, Deputy Ministers, as well as we were meant to be joined by the Permanent Secretary from Malawi, but we now have Madalo Nyambose representing the rail agency in Malawi. So I thought let me just start, Minister Chrissy as the host minister. What we're going to cover in the next few minutes, in the next 45 minutes or so, will traverse areas of policy enabling this transporting Africa forward. And recently there was, you alluded to it in your speech, one of the significant developments around South Africa's program of private sector participation in as far as rail and Transnet is concerned. Please locate that for us within the context of what we're trying to achieve. What are we trying to do here, and how far are we from the bold vision set out in the national rail policy?
You know, Chula Sizwe, I love your introductory remarks because I think it's helpful to quote from the Economic Commission for Africa that estimates that the free trade area will result in growing Africa's rail network by 26,000 kilometers and will require 97,000 wagons for bulk cargo and 20,000 wagons for container cargo by 2030. And this would increase the current continental fleet from to 132,000 bulk cargo wagons and 36,000 container wagons. Now, I'm raising this because I think that it's very important that we understand the enormous investment potential, first of all, the significant impact that this demand for trade can have on building new railways and upgrading current railways on the subcontinent, on the continent, and also, of course, in the context of the input we had from Gibela earlier, the enormous demand that there's going to be as a result of this new golden age of rail for rolling stock. And I think it's very important to think about it in that way, because if we think about it in that way, we can understand the tasks that rest with all of us to, first of all, upgrade our existing rail. I think our colonial fathers, most of them weren't mothers, they were fathers. Our colonial fathers left us with this railway network, which is in a better or worse condition, but there is that network. And I think that what we've got to do is, first of all, to prioritize upgrading it, and second of all, to upgrade the rolling stock that will be moving on it, and to make sure that we have this existing interoperability that already exists on our continent. And of course, what we know is that none of us have the money in our national treasuries to do this, and therefore we're going to need private partners both in infrastructure investment and in train operations and in rolling stock operations. So I would want to suggest that that is where we need to focus on the development of those partnerships and on the capacitation of all of us to be able to develop those partnerships in an appropriate manner.
All right, Minister, thank you for that. And I like the way you're framing it. May you please pass on the mic this way. I like the way you're framing it, because that whole issue of trade being at the heart of it, regional trade, and collaboration between countries appears to me to have been a theme as I was looking at some of the developments in your various countries. Deputy Minister Sako, your country I'm very familiar with. I spent a good 3 years in your country, Zimbabwe. Tell me about the regional collaboration and integration that you are trying to drive. It also appears to be a strong theme in terms of your approach to these matters. And recently, you had this agreement with Mozambique, and I found it to be quite interesting. The interoperability that Minister Chrissy was talking about of the various rolling stock, but also driving volumes on your side. Tell me about that initiative.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Sara for the invite and our host minister, Chrissy, for having us here in Johannesburg, South Africa. Zimbabwe, as you are very aware, is at the center of Southern Africa, of SADC, and we feel this is really an opportunity for us to play a role of connecting South Africa to the north, Mozambique to the east, Botswana, Namibia, going to the north, the DRC and Zambia. And as Minister Chrissy has mentioned, our infrastructure is outdated, has seen better days, and we really have to be innovative in a way to look at how we can rehabilitate the infrastructure that we have, but also improve on it if we are to participate and contribute to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and to work on the SADC Regional Infrastructure Development Plan for regional integration. And so we take it very seriously as a country, and we're looking at it from a number of perspectives. That Zimbabwe is fortunately endowed with vast wealth in the mineral sector, and most of this needs to be carried by rail. And we're facing challenges where a lot of trade coming from the north, from the DRC, Zambia into Zimbabwe to Beira, is currently going by road, which is causing congestion, damage to our roads, and ultimately this should be carried by rail. So one of the initiatives we are looking at is the missing link between Lion's Den, north of Harare, and Kafue in Zambia. And this would be a game changer for us, moving freight from the road onto rail. But we're also looking at, in the short term, as we look at financing options, collaboration with our neighboring countries. There is a plan with Mozambique looking at a port in Chabanini, which will then connect to Zimbabwe into Botswana. This is a 1,700 kilometer corridor, estimated value of about 6.5 billion. And this would also be a game changer for the region. And we're at a stage where we're in discussions with the Africa Development Bank to do a feasibility study on that. And that will really be a huge game changer. But what we are doing in collaboration with Mozambique and Botswana, we are working on the current infrastructure that we've got, repairing cautions, so that we can use what we have whilst we look at ultimately this new project. And the whole issue of, as Zimbabwe on policy, we are looking as well at separating the infrastructure from operators. We have a success story with BRR, the rail from Beitbridge to Bulawayo, which is working well. We're also in partnerships with a lot of mining companies who move their freight on our rail. So moving towards open access framework, we've already started that, but looking at increasing access to other key corridors, which will bring in competition, which will bring in efficiency as well. And the minister here, Minister Creasy, has just announced the same policy for open access in South Africa. And we believe that then we need, as government, to work on regulation to make sure that it is done properly.
Deputy Minister, thank you for that. If you don't mind, I'm going to just do something unusual. I need to get us a second microphone so that we're able to move along quite swiftly. Minister Atamelang, Deputy Minister Atamelang, if I may just bring you in. If I may just bring you in from Botswana, new leadership, new vision, new energy. We are all seeing it and witnessing it from across the board, across the Southern African continent. But some of the conversations are not necessarily new, are they? The whole conversation around the Trans-Kalahari corridor and the work that has now been re-emphasized with a new energy, as I say, by President Dumaboko, that 1,500 kilometer stretch that would run from Botswana to Walvis Bay. Is that your main preoccupation in as far as the rail space is concerned, and how does it fit in with your policy priorities around, moving the economy in Botswana?
Thank you for the question. Good morning, everyone. I think what I can start off first is to say that something exciting is happening in Botswana, like you rightfully said, from young leadership, and this is it's an intentional trajectory of the country to actually grow the economy in all aspects. So fresh ideas, new energy, like you rightfully said. So we are in a process of trying to develop actually not one corridor, but a couple of them. The Trans-Kalahari, which is 1,500 kilometers. We have the Tocha Benini, the one that Minister said, which links Botswana and Zimbabwe. In Mozambique, we have Mama Bulale Palale, which is South Africa and Botswana. Mosetse, Livingston, Kazungula. Now this one links us with Zambia and ultimately with Congo. So with that, like we said, the intention is now to grow the economy, or to establish Botswana as a champion or a center of logistics, if you might say, because geographically we are right in the center of SADC, and we are a transit platform as well. All trains pass through our country. I think the challenge now that we are facing is domestically is it's how ministries overlap. There's that historic gap or disconnect in terms of ministries. You find you develop a road towards the border, you develop a railway towards the border, you develop the border post, and then you hand it over. Then the gap in terms of utilizing it or extending it to your neighboring country becomes now an impediment factor to the transit or to the train itself. But in terms of that, what we are trying to do now is to establish bilateral agreements. We are trying to go towards standardization, which is the best option we could possibly think of, because for South Africa's railway line or corridor that links them to Congo, for it to be effective, Botswana's railway line has to be to par with that. So for Zimbabwe's railway line to perform, our railway line has to be as good. So we don't want to be the weakest link in the region. So we are going to in that direction, and we are working towards open access as well. We are in the process of actually now opening our railway line above rail and below rail to invite players to come through. Even triple P's models. There's been we've done feasibility studies for all these corridors that I've mentioned earlier. So the expectation now is all key players should come in and try to help us grow the economy. But all this is done on the basis of having a succession plan of what happens in 50 years. After 50 years, how is Africa going to be? So this whole thing from leadership level all the way to the detail of the railway line. So thank you.
Deputy Minister, thank you. Let me bring you in, Mam Nyambos, from Malawi's side. This whole conversation about regional integration and trade between countries, I think from what I've seen, you've been putting it into practice, haven't you, with countries such as Zambia and Mozambique. You meet in a tripartite format, as far as I understand. Tell me how that fits with your policy priorities, particularly trying to drive volumes, that lead to the Nakala corridor, that stretch there.
Thank you so much. I think first and foremost is to say thank you to Sara for convening this meeting, and of course, thank you, hosting minister, and the participation in this conversation. Indeed, Malawi is landlocked. Of course, we call ourselves land-linked. Through the Nakara corridor, where Malawi, Mozambique, and Zambia came together, have a proper agreement for that corridor. It's helping so much in standardization of what we are doing along the corridor. And it's also helping with the coordination on development, because as it is at the moment, we have done the Nakara corridor, and then through our concessionaire, we are completing the rehabilitation connecting Zambia at Chipata through Nchinji border. So you can imagine that this is now providing a seamless, train would be providing seamless train to Chipata. And we are in discussion through this framework where we meet every year to discuss about the developments. But then with the Mozambique, we are not just looking at the Nakara corridor, we are also looking at the Beira corridor. We have, as we speak, started rehabilitation on our connection to the Sena line through Maka, that's lower Malawi from Sanje. We have done 26 kilometers to Sanje district, where we can actually, we have tested, we have received some goods through Beira. So from our point of view, the rail presents to us a very, very important connection, because at the moment we are losing quite a lot of our roads, because all our trade is coming through the road. So we would want to shift to the rail, and we have the National Transport Master Plan that is guiding us through this. But we know that to complete this, the regional integration is critical.
Yeah. In fact, if I stick with you, Mam Nyambas, and ask you, what were you intentional in linking all of these rail developments with the work around the Mchinji Mwami one-stop border post? What are you communicating in terms of the ease with which goods should be able to flow through the various countries with that one-stop border post process, for example?
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, one of the things I think our borders taught us is how much we would want to keep away from each other. But I think slowly, but progressively, we are also learning that in fact, together indeed will be better. And the one-stop border posts are proving to be the best tool in this working together, because then it is shortening the processes at borders. So it is really intentional. And we are not just doing that with Zambia. Of course, Zambia has become operational, but we are also doing that with Mozambique and also Tanzania, because this is what we need. Trade should not have a lot of constraints on our borders. Thank you.
Yeah. And Deputy Minister Sako, if I can ask the mic to be brought closer to you, because the next theme I want to touch on has to do with integration. And as I was saying earlier on, you are already on that path with CFM in Mozambique, but also with Transnet, the South African side. How are you finding that to be working? How's that working in terms of improving volumes and the likes and efficiencies?
Thank you. For us, collaboration is ultimately very important. The theme of the conference, Together We Will Be Better. We couldn't put it in a better way. With our Mozambican counterparts, we have collaborated on the line from Beira to Machipanda, but actually going further into Zimbabwe to Mutare and ultimately to Harare. So that is working very well. The rehabilitation of the line has gone as far as Mutare so far, and we are working towards getting as far as Harare. And our collaboration with Transnet to the south as well. The north-south corridor is of utmost importance. But going forward, we're also looking at the issues around the border posts themselves, because there's no point in having the rail infrastructure and then bottlenecks at the borders. So we have upgraded the Beitbridge border post, and we are looking at a seamless movement of freight at Beitbridge to improve times. And I think issue of Transnet trains coming into Zimbabwe and NRZ trains going into Zimbabwe, so that we don't have delays on movement of freight. But also we are looking at upgrading the border post at Forbes, Machipanda, where we bound with border with Mozambique. We are looking at, I think within the next couple of months, groundbreaking the new upgrade of the border post, which will also ease move of freight through Forbes border post into Mozambique. We are also working on Chirundu border post to the north with Zambia, so that we can also create a one-stop border post there. And this will allow ease of movement of goods through rail and road, but ultimately removing those bottlenecks.
Yeah.
So it's very important for us as a country to open up. And I think collaborations where we have open access will also help if we have operators in South Africa being allowed to come into Zimbabwe and vice versa. The same with Mozambique and Botswana. I think this, just like the open skies policy, will really open up the space and allow for competition and efficiency.
Yeah. I see that Deputy Minister Atamelang likes the comparison you make with the open skies. As we go to another theme, Deputy Minister, just on the financing of it all, one of the themes I was saying that I picked up is almost in all of the countries represented on this stage, and in a number of other countries of people who are here as delegates, the conversation around open access, the conversation around private-public partnerships is really amplifying. What's driving that? And are you finding as Botswana, as you're starting these conversations, that there is appetite for that?
Thank you. Yes. No, I think the appetite is there. It's definitely there. I mean, for starters, I think the SADC countries cannot afford to actually develop this infrastructure by themselves. So I think now having private triple Ps come into play, it gives an opportunity now to actually have private sector-led economies, and those are the ones that are actually standing the test of time and are resilient more, as opposed to just only government, you know. And again, as a country, would wish to offload some of our responsibilities, you know, to give the private sector leeway to participate. And like he rightfully said, competition gives birth to innovation, and innovation gives birth to progress. So that's what we want as a country. So if you try to grab everything, you won't be able to succeed. So for us to build these railway corridors, it will mean massive capital investment, and which we don't have at the moment. So the only way is to actually now open it to other investors. So I'm calling all investors to come to Botswana. We are linked, we are geographically centered, and we advocate for non-stop border posts, and we advocate for standardization from legislation to policies. It's quite unfortunate, you know, a train comes from Zimbabwe, it has to stop in Botswana for the longest, or vice versa. It leaves Botswana, it stops in South Africa. But you know, if we fix our frameworks, then it will be easy. But investors are attracted to good and safe frameworks. So we are heading to that direction where we would say our framework should be investor friendly. So yeah.
Yeah, Minister Chris, please weigh in on that, but perhaps from the more international framework. You alluded to South Africa ratifying the Luxembourg Rail Protocol. That fits in with this conversation around financing, doesn't it? The new models of financing. Why was that an important step for you to take? And how does it fit in with facilitating what is called asset-based financing and leasing models?
Well, I think that obviously it's extremely important that our country and of course our neighbors should be in line with modern regulatory trends, because I think what we are all saying is that we require international financing in order to upgrade our rail links. And of course, we also require domestic financing from our domestic development financing institutions. So I think that making sure that we are members of international protocols that facilitate open access amongst ourselves and with other international rail organizations obviously gives investors the certainty that we have a particular policy perspective. But I think that one of the things we've learned from experiments that we've done in our energy sector is that being able to achieve financial close on private sector investment, in this instance in the production of energy, is not necessarily a simple process. And we know that some of the bid windows for private generation were not successful because people put themselves forward at certain prices that in the end were not viable and not sustainable. And I would want to say that in addition to being party to international protocols, it's also important that we develop our own domestic capacity to support private sector participation in our rail links. And in this regard, the work that we are doing with the Development Bank of South Africa to establish a private sector participation unit we think is very necessary to ensure that all of the opportunities that we're putting out to the private sector reach financial close. And in that regard, I think there's two issues. The first is that whatever bids we put out, we must do proper research. What is the market appetite? And under what conditions would there be market appetite? I think that's very important, because what we've learned in Transnet and in PRASA is that we've put out bids that have been non-responsive. So doing that proper research is important, but then establishing capacity that can sift through that information and then advise how do you put together the bids so that they will be market responsive, but at the same time they will be able to reach financial close.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is a suggestion that one would be wanting to make to our Southern African counterparts, is that you consider developing this kind of domestic capacity so that you can ensure that in the end the opportunities that you're putting out to the market are in fact responsive.
Right. Mam Nyambos, if you can weigh in as well on how the conversation around financing is shaping up in Malawi. Financing all of this infrastructure upgrades and build. Are you having similar conversations around open access, the triple Ps that we've been talking about, and how is that shaping up on your side?
Thank you so much. For Malawi, yes, we are already having that conversation, and I think just to share the fact that in fact one of the sections that is operational in Nakara, it was through a triple P arrangement, and it is successful.
Yeah.
And we believe that this is the model that we can also do in revitalizing the other sections that are not in use at the moment. The treasury is very limited. We cannot do more with especially in the rail. The investment requirement is very huge. So we are looking at collaboration, the public investments, the private investments, and then looking at the international financing institutions. So we believe that we will do it. Of course, as the minister, one of the ministers said, having a financial clause with, in the discussion with the private sector, it's not a simple issue. It's very long. I think the other one that we did took almost more than 2 years actually to close. So we believe that it's possible, it can be done. In Malawi it has been done. We should pursue this, and it's in an invitation to the private sector to partner governments in the investment in the rail, because this is what it would be the in thing. The statistics that have been given, looking at the African free trade area, there is a huge opportunity for making money in the rail. Thank you.
Deputy Minister Sako, let's talk about the preference that I picked up. It seems there's a preference at a policy level that the infrastructure will remain state-owned, whereas they'll be opening up for opportunities for participation by the public sector, such as train operating companies in the South African model. Explain to us why that preference. It's certainly a move away from stereotypical African policy perspectives, which you would have expected years ago, that we prefer to own and run everything. But just explain what the preference is for the state to continue to own the infrastructure. What advantage is there to that?
Thank you. If you look at it from a perspective of opening up, I think it's a very progressive policy. Zimbabwe is moving with that policy, South Africa the same, and Botswana and elsewhere, to allow private sector to be involved in running rolling stock, in running passenger trains, in running transport of cargo, if you look at the mining sector in South Africa and Zimbabwe and elsewhere, inefficiencies on the rail ultimately affect viability of most mining companies.
Yeah.
And I think it's really that we don't really have an option to not to open up, because we would lose much more if we don't open up. But ultimately, the infrastructure itself should remain owned by the government. It's also used for social services, transport of people. So if you privatize that, then you also you can be, held at ransom by private owners. So I think that the infrastructure itself should remain state-owned, but allow open access for players from the mining sector, those in transport of commuters, to ultimately invest in rolling stock, and possibly in some of the areas where concessionary arrangements can be made to invest in the infrastructure itself as well.
Yeah, and if I stick with you, Deputy Minister Sako, in terms of the what's driving the volumes right now, what I've seen is there's a lot of talk about mining and minerals and the export thereof and the likes. What's your experience in Zimbabwe in terms of diversifying that and driving industrialization beyond the traditional mineral resource-based kind of industrialization, such that the trade volumes also diversify as well?
Well, as a government, we are moving towards value addition within the country. So value addition of lithium, for example, into concentrates, and steel. The steel industry in Zimbabwe, we've established quite a large steel manufacturing company in central Zimbabwe, where value addition is also being done. So movement of raw materials from one place to another will also be key. So we're not only looking at exporting raw materials to the ports, but movement of raw materials, whether it's agricultural produce, whether it's minerals. Tourism as well is one of the big factors for us. We just had the Blue Train recently reintroduced from South Africa to Victoria Falls. Movement of people from within the different cities in Zimbabwe is also a priority, but also commuter trains from our satellite cities around Harare into Harare and outside Harare. All of those are of preference. So you're looking at tourism, movement of people, agricultural produce, raw materials within the country, and then the exports as well.
I want to move us towards a close, but Deputy Minister Atamelang, I do need to take advantage of the fact that you are here and ask you about Kalahari City. There's a lot being said about that. Could you just share with everyone in the room? Because it sounds almost as if it's not part of rail, but it's part of the strategic thinking, isn't it, around how to make rail the backbone, as we say in South Africa, of transportation, but then spurring on other developments. What's this Kalahari City about?
Like I said earlier, something exciting is happening in Botswana. So people need to start scoping that area, that country.
Yeah.
No, Kalahari City is closer to. We have a sort of a bilateral agreement with Namibia. We have a dry port in Namibia. So the idea is, when we develop the Trans-Kalahari railway line, the corridor, then it will be linking with the Kalahari City. So it's going to be a logistics hub. It's smart city. We are, it's like what the Arabs have started.
Yes.
So that we are heading in that direction, and the train is full steam.
The train is
Yeah,
moving.
it's moving, and we the intention is to actually establish ourselves as a powerhouse in the region and even in Africa. So that is the idea. So Kalahari City it's happening. Like I said, investors are more than welcome to see which part of the cake they can take on. But it's a logistic hub that will be linking us with Namibia, the Americas, and yeah.
Yeah. Minister Chris, let me ask you about the journey forward in as far as the public sector participation programs. You alluded to a request for information, and the way I understood you to be saying it is it's looking more towards the passenger rail space, is it?
Well, we've already concluded a request for information on the 5 priority freight corridors of Transnet. And we expect incrementally during the remainder of this year to begin to put out bids for infrastructure upgrades, major refurbishment on those lines. We're not just talking about fixing a little bit of ballast here and there,
Yeah.
but major refurbishment of those lines so that they can perform to the appetite for freight. I mean, we've set the target of 250 million tons by 2029, but we are told that the appetite is already as much as 300 million tons. Now, you are not going to be able to increase the train slots, you're not going to be able to increase the volumes on those lines unless there is fundamental refurbishment. And that is what we want to do. So the intention on the one hand is to have private operators in addition to Transnet Freight itself, but on the other hand to look at some kind of a concessioning model so that we can bring in major refurbishment of the key freight corridors. And in due course we are also putting out a request for information on the PRASA network that could include long distance passenger rail, particularly between Gauteng and Limpopo, Mpumalanga and KZN.
Nyambo, so let me start with you just as we go towards a close. What does the track ahead look like for you in Malawi? When we sit here next year, what developments do you look forward to telling us about at the next edition of the Sara Rail Conference in as far as your policy priorities are concerned and the implementation thereof? What will the landscape look like in the months coming ahead?
Thank you so much. I think what we'll be happy to inform you about is the increased trade on the Nakara corridor all the way to Chipata. And we will also be informing you of the progress that we have made with connection to the Sena line and the trade that would have already started going on from Beira using the Sena line to Malawi. And of course, one of the other issues that we would also be informing you would be the financing that we have perhaps concluded and gotten to complete the connection all the way to the Nakara line that connects in the Blantyre Limbi, because that's operational. But we really would want the Beira Limbi to Nakara connection complete, and that's the story that we would want to come with here. Thank you.
We look forward to it. And Deputy Minister Atamelang, just from your side, we've touched on some of the projects, and perhaps you can link it up and put it all together for us, that it's not just the Trans-Kalahari, it's not just Kalahari City and the other exciting initiatives, but what does the track ahead look like in the coming months for you as far as rail policy and implementation is concerned?
I think for us, the starting point is the open access legislation. It has to be in place. I think that is our first starting point. But like I said, I think we are working tirelessly to actually fix that and make sure that it's on point, and it's also investor friendly, because sometimes, you know, with legislation, if you do a hard one, it's also difficult to actually revise it because it's time consuming. So we are trying to actually now make sure that we waterproof it, and then we finalize it. In terms of development as a general, like I said, we have the Trans-Kalahari corridor, we have the Mosetse-Kazungula, we have Lephala Mama Bule. One of the challenges that we are facing is actually now trying to establish the national agreements. You know, there's that bit of overlapping of authorities, like you have Transnet and Botswana Railways. But for them to actually develop a project together, now you need it on a governance level. But if the government are not in the same frequencies, it becomes a challenge. But we are in a process also to actually establish that conduit so that we can actually iron those things out and have our corridors developed in no time. But in terms of in the next few months, like I said, it's the legislation first, and after that, the consequential policies will follow through. But the invitation still stands. Please come to Botswana. Botswana is the place to be, and exciting things are happening. Kalahari City also, it's happening.
We'll be shopping in Kalahari City.
Yes, you'll be. It's a manufacturing hub. Everything you could actually think of. But the idea is also just to grow the economy. And there's a change of mindset now. We are reprioritizing rail, because when you look at rail it gives you access to everything. It gives you access to tourism, agriculture, mining, and Botswana also is blessed with so many natural resources. So if we make sure that all our corridors are intact, then we'll definitely be a powerhouse without just being
Minister Chrissy.
Thank
Minister Chrissy, I feel like I've already asked you about the road ahead, but let me ask you anyway, and perhaps you can talk to it and link to what Deputy Minister Atamelang was saying about the sense that there's a need to coordinate more at a regional level, collaborate more, and perhaps, I don't know, in my own thinking, maybe formalize some of that collaboration so that, we're able to talk to almost protocols that we can speak to.
I'm a great believer that if you don't know where you're going, any road can take you there.
Yeah.
And, or in this case, any railway line. So I think that for me, the most important development is going to be the finalization of our master rail plan, because that will link in with the SADC master rail plan. I think that the SADC master rail plan gives us a regional vision. What we all need to do is develop our domestic plans to link in with that vision, and then it will be easy to meet with each other and say, we're taking our line from here to here. How do we facilitate cross-border access, ease of movement, interoperability of rolling stock? And let me say, there was an important point that you raised with Deputy Minister Sako. Why does it help to have the infrastructure remaining state-owned? And one of the reasons is that it facilitates interoperability. We are late comers to rail reform in sub-Saharan Africa. But the benefit of being a late comer is you can learn from other people's mistakes. Yeah. And other countries that have sold off pieces of their rail lines to different operators and different service providers have found that it limits interoperability, and it also has an impact on standards, particularly maintenance standards. So I think that we have got a good foundation for the work that we want to do. We already have a regional plan. What we've got to do is make sure that our domestic plans synergize with it, and then the basis for interregional cooperation is there. Thank you very much.
All right, I've got to thank you for that. Lastly, Deputy Minister Sako, just from your side, what does the track ahead look like for Zimbabwe in the rail space?
Thank you very much. I think the need for legislative reform, which we are already working on, but also ratification of the Luxembourg Protocol. Our teams are already
that's in the pipeline.
Working on that as well. But what's most important is, I think, the regional collaboration on mega projects, on investment frameworks, to establish maybe a SADC Rail Development Fund, so that funding can be pulled together It doesn't help for Botswana to work on a rail project and it ends at their border, or Zimbabwe the same, or South Africa. I think ultimately collaboration on mega projects to promote interoperability between our countries. And I believe the political will is in place and we have the correct leadership to do it. So as Minister was mentioning, we can learn from mistakes of others, but we really need to replicate what we've seen in aviation with rail as well, to open up our countries to access for private operators and ultimately upgrade the network, because it's really in our interest as we move towards trade between our countries and the opening up of our economies.
All right, thank you very much for that. And look at that, we're spot on 45 minutes exactly as we promised, and we delivered on that. Thank you. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've found it fascinating, enlightening, as well as edifying as well.